Thank you very much. I speak to you this morning in an hour of anguish for our nation. Just before 9 p.m. last night, an American Airlines regional jet carrying 60 passengers and 4 crew collided with an Army Black Hawk helicopter carrying 3 military service members over the Potomac River in Washington, D.C., while on final approach to Reagan National Airport. Both aircraft crashed instantly and were immediately submerged into the icy waters of the Potomac. Real tragedy. The massive search and rescue mission was underway throughout the night, leveraging every asset at our disposal, and I have to say the local, state, federal, military, including the United States Coast Guard in particular, they've done a phenomenal job. So quick, so fast, it was mobilized immediately. The work has now shifted to a recovery mission. Sadly, there are no survivors. This was a dark and excruciating night in our nation's capital and in our nation's history, and a tragedy of terrible proportions. As one nation, we grieve for every precious soul that has been taken from us so suddenly, and we are a country of really, we are in mourning. This has really shaken a lot of people, including people, very sadly, from other nations who were on the flight. For the family members back in Wichita, Kansas, here in Washington, D.C., and throughout the United States and in Russia, we have a Russia contingent, some very talented people, unfortunately, were on that plane. Very, very, very sorry about that. Whose loved ones were aboard the passenger jet. We can only begin to imagine the agony that you're all feeling. Nothing worse. On behalf of the First Lady, myself, and 340 million Americans, our hearts are shattered alongside yours, and our prayers are with you now and in the days to come. We'll be working very, very diligently in the days to come. We're here for you to wipe away the tears and to offer you our devotion, our love, and our support. There's great support. In moments like this, the differences between Americans fade to nothing compared to the bonds of affection and loyalty that unite us all, both as Americans and even as nations. We are one family, and today we are all heartbroken. We're all searching for answers. That icy, icy Potomac, it was a cold, cold night, cold water. We're all overcome with the grief for many who have so tragically perished, will no longer be with us. Together we take solace in the knowledge that their journey ended not in the cold waters of the Potomac, but in the warm embrace of a loving God. We do not know what led to this crash, but we have some very strong opinions and ideas, and I think we'll probably state those opinions now. Because over the years I've watched as things like this happen, and they say, well, we're always investigating, and then the investigation 3 years later, they announce it. We think we have some pretty good ideas. But we'll find out how this disaster occurred, and we'll ensure that nothing like this ever happens again. The FAA and the NTSB and the U.S. military will be carrying out a systematic and comprehensive investigation. Our new Secretary of Transportation, Sean Duffy, his second day on the job when that happened. It's a rough one. We'll be working tirelessly. He's a great gentleman. The whole group these are great people, and they are working tirelessly to figure out exactly what happened. We will state certain opinions, however. I'm also immediately appointing an acting commissioner to the FAA, Christopher Rocheleau, a 22-year veteran of the agency, highly respected. Christopher, thank you very much. Appreciate it. We must have only the highest standards for those who work in our aviation system. I changed the Obama standards from very mediocre at best to extraordinary. You remember that. Only the highest aptitude, they have to be the highest intellect and psychologically superior people were allowed to qualify for air traffic controllers. That was not so prior to getting there. When I arrived in 2016. I made that change very early on because I always felt this was a job that, and other jobs too, but this was a job that had to be superior intelligence, and we didn't really have that, and we had it. And then when I left office and Biden took over, he changed them back to lower than ever before. I put safety first. Obama, Biden, and the Democrats put policy first. And they put politics at a level that nobody's ever seen, because this was the lowest level. Their policy was horrible, and their politics was even worse. So as you know, last week, long before the crash, I signed an executive order restoring our highest standards for air traffic controllers and other important jobs throughout the country. So it was very interesting. About a week ago, almost upon entering office, I signed something last week that was an executive order, very powerful, on restoring the highest standards of air traffic controllers and others, by the way. Then my administration will set the highest possible bar for aviation safety. We have to have our smartest people. It doesn't matter what they look like, how they speak, who they are. It matters intellect, talent, the word talent. They have to be talented, naturally talented geniuses. You can't have regular people doing that job. They won't be able to do it. But we'll restore faith in American air travel. I'll have more to say about that. I do want to point out that various articles that appeared prior to my entering office, and here's one. The FAA's diversity push includes focus on hiring people with severe intellectual and psychiatric disabilities. That is amazing. And then it says FAA says people with severe disabilities are most underrepresented segment of the workforce, and they want them in, and they want them, they can be air traffic controllers. I don't think so. This was in January 14th, so that was a week before I entered office. They put a big push to put diversity into the FAA's program. Then another article, the Federal Aviation Administration, this was before I got to office, recently, second term. The FAA is actively recruiting workers who suffer severe intellectual disabilities, psychiatric problems, and other mental and physical conditions under a diversity and inclusion hiring initiative spelled out on the agency's website. Can you imagine? These are people that are, I mean, actually, their lives are shortened because of the stress that they have. Brilliant people have to be in those positions, and their lives are actually shortened, very substantially shortened, because of the stress, where you have many, many planes coming into one target, and you need a very special talent and a very special genius to be able to do it. Targeted disabilities are those disabilities that the federal government, as a matter of policy, has identified for special emphasis in recruitment and hiring. The FAA's website states they include hearing, vision, missing extremities, partial paralysis, complete paralysis, epilepsy, severe intellectual disability, psychiatric disability, and dwarfism all qualify for the position of a controller of airplanes pouring into our country, pouring into a little spot, a little dot on the map, a little runway. The initiative is part of the FAA's diversity and inclusion hiring plan. Think of that. The initiative is part of the FAA's diversity and inclusion hiring plan, which says diversity is integral to achieving FAA's mission of ensuring safe and efficient travel. I don't think so. I don't think so. I think it's just the opposite. The FAA website shows that the agency's guidance on diversity hiring were last updated on March 23rd of 22. They wanted to make it even more so. And then I came in, and I assume maybe this is the reason. The FAA, which is overseen by Secretary Pete Buttigieg, a real winner. That guy's a real winner. Do you know how badly everything's run since he's run this Department of Transportation? He's a disaster. He was a disaster as a mayor. He ran his city into the ground, and he's a disaster now. He's just got a good line of bullshit. The Department of Transportation, his government agency charged with regulating civil aviation. Well, he runs it, 45,000 people, and he's run it right into the ground with his diversity. So I had to say that it's terrible. Then it's a group within the FAA, another story, determined that the workforce was...
You were listening to the U.S. President Donald Trump speak following that American Airlines Flight 5342, which collided with an Army helicopter as it was about to land at Reagan National Airport. Unfortunately, no survivors, and the U.S. President says authorities have some strong opinions on the causes of this plane crash. France 24's Douglas Herbert was listening to what the U.S. President had to say. Doug, normally at a time of national tragedy, U.S. presidents, bring the country together. But it seems that Donald Trump is being political.
Well, first of all, obviously tragedies are not a time to be glib. You're absolutely right. The president, as the commander-in-chief, is also the empathizer-in-chief, or supposed to be the communicator-in-chief, and like you said, supposed to be a unifying, reassuring, solidifying message, if you will. Donald Trump, when he started carefully, remember, this is his first appearance in the White House briefing room since he returned to the White House, coming on a day, obviously, with a major tragedy in Washington, D.C. itself at Reagan National Airport. Amid questions, obviously, yet to be answered by either the new Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth, or the Army itself as to why the Army was apparently conducting training missions with its personnel in an area around a domestic airport late at night. Those are all outstanding questions, so unanswered, but for now the president is trying to obviously issue his condolences to the victims. He was reading very much from prepared remarks, so it's notable he wasn't going off script here. He was trying to communicate something that had been obviously prepared and written for him. But what struck me from these remarks is, like you said, it wasn't exactly unifying in the sense that he used this as an opportunity once again, in a sense, weaponizing this tragedy to use it as a cudgel against past administrations, notably his immediate predecessor Joe Biden and Barack Obama, the insinuation being that it was their laxness, their loosening, perhaps, of regulations, or their hiring of untalented or incompetent people.
DEI. He keeps going off the DEI.
Exactly. Diversity, equity, inclusion. All these policies he's trying to slash. He basically implying that it was because of the people that were hired to be in American air traffic control, to work in American aviation under these past Democratic administrations. It was those practices, those policies that created the conditions that led to this disaster, this tragedy, which, as we know, are tons of unanswered questions.
Yeah,
we
the
don't know
investigation
right now.
has not even...
But it's right away in this very opening press conference, in the very opening minutes, no sooner had he closed his mouth from issuing those tributes, which were very emotional, albeit from prepared remarks. But there's undoubtedly absolute emotion in that, and a real desire to communicate what people can agree on is a horrible tragedy. But without skipping a beat, in the next breath, going on the attack, weaponizing that tragedy, in essence almost nullifying the tribute that he just delivered to the victims by turning it into yet another opportunity to bash his predecessors, those he perceives as his opponents, Democratic rivals, Democratic opponents, insinuating and saying at one point, doesn't matter what you look like, talent is what counts. We'll hire, the best people, the most talented people. He used the word geniuses, a word that he often uses when he's referring self-referentially, referring to himself, obviously holding geniuses in high regard. But that doesn't matter what they look like. Once again, an insinuation, a shot across the bow, if you will, of those so-called DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion policies, inclusivity policies that Donald Trump, in the opening days of his administration, has been taking basically a bludgeon to, basically dismantling those policies across the federal government.